What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Perfectly Blended podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the church's perspective in blended families. And when's that coming up?
Right now.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Perfectly Blended podcast. This podcast is for blended families, for couples that want to strengthen their marriage and want a brighter future. Perfectly Blended exists to break the stigma of divorce, drop the shame and guilt holding you back, and equip marriages to thrive instead of just survive. We believe all that is possible in this life is based on the power of Jesus Christ and His ability to restore us fully. Let's dive in. What is up, everybody? Welcome to today's show. I'm one of your hosts, Josh, here with the always gorgeous Miss Christy. How are you, my love?
I'm good.
You good?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. She's like, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She said, what is the date today? Tell everybody.
11122.
11122. This is what she was saying while that video was playing, okay?
I'm like, it's 11122.
11122. That's what time and date. No, that's what the date is. Okay.
He's like, what is that? I'm like, it's today's date.
That's just being goofy. All right, before we jump in, right, we want to talk about church and blended families and a perspective of that. We want to dive into all that. But before we even get started on that, we have, in just a few short days, have an event coming up for you. If you are even anywhere near the Michigan area, in mid-Michigan, we are going to have a blended family event. It's coming up this Saturday, November 5th. November 5th. It's an all-day event.
11522.
There you go. 11522. If you haven't registered yet, please make sure that you do so. You can go to joshandchristy.com. I will make sure to leave a link down below. It's going to be an all-day thing. It's going to be a lot of cool stuff going on, so you want to make sure you get signed up for it. Okay.
Yeah.
Before we jump in.
We got lots of giveaways.
We actually have a ton of giveaways. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say before we jump in today?
Nope.
You got nothing on your mind?
Nope.
No, not nothing. No. She almost yawned right there. It was coming.
I did. I tried. I held it back.
She held it back. She's like, not yawning today.
No, because my foot is still going on for all of you guys that don't know, or that do know, and we're wondering. My foot is still going on. I'm still not waiting. There's my scooter.
There's the scooter. There she is. She made a cameo.
I'm still non-weight bearing. It's dumb. It's been 12 weeks. Last Thursday. This Thursday's going to be 13 weeks.
It's a lot of weeks.
So it's like...
It's a lot of weeks.
Right. My wound.
She did find some Coke Zero Vanilla for anybody out there that is fans of that. It's been so long since we had to buy some that they actually changed the look of the can, which is kind of funny.
I only have one 12-pack left after this.
So if anybody's thinking about Christmas presents, Coke Zero Vanilla. That's the size she wears.
Yeah.
So we'll go with that. Okay, so let's dive in, right? So let's talk about this. This is kind of controversial, but doesn't really need to be. To be honest with you, we want to talk about some points about the perspective of the church when it comes to blended families. And so I got into a pretty awesome conversation with one of the pastors at my church today, and it was pretty revealing, and I want to share a little bit about that too.
You didn't tell me about that.
No, it's a surprise. All about surprising. She bit her lip and snarled. She was like, you like surprises? Mm. It's funny. I heard somebody says, you like the surprises you want, not the ones you don't want. And that's true. That's a good surprise. So I'll pet your hair and then we'll be good. Okay, we're good. Okay, so blended families, church perspective, right? So the very first thing we want to talk about is let's talk about they fear supporting divorce. And this is just being honest, right? This is just being honest. Let's talk a little bit about the fear of the church supporting divorce. What does that mean?
Well, and some churches wouldn't come right out and say that, but that is ultimately the root of it, is that they don't want to talk about people having amazing, awesome second marriages or third marriages or, God forbid, someone that's been married 4 times, like, Lord have mercy. They're going straight to hell.
And not all churches, right? We're not here to say that this is all churches, right? By any means.
No, but I'm just saying, like, for them to talk about and offer, like, how you can have a successful second marriage or third marriage, they feel deep down that it's supporting divorce. Like, hey, if you're on the rocks, you can get a divorce because when you get married again, we have an awesome program that can help you.
And that is a fear.
Which is not true. Like, we've had many conversations. Josh and I have had many conversations. It's no different than having, we have Celebrate Recovery at our church. We have Celebrate Recovery at our church. It's not promoting addiction. Like, hey, start doing drugs.
You
Because if you do, then you can become part of Celebrate Recovery and get recovered. You know, like it's just not the way that it is. The perception around it is wrong.
Yeah. And I would say, of course, you know, we can't speak for all the churches by any means, but we've been in this space long enough now. We've been able to talk to enough people that do ministries in their own local churches, and it's connected to a lot of this stuff. And the majority of them say the churches are just afraid of talking about divorce or supporting programs like these because of the fear, like, you know, we're just not comfortable with it, right? They don't know how to handle it. And that's fair. But what can we do to combat that, right? Is make sure that you're having healthy conversations with your church leadership. You have to be bold in these ways, right? You have to go to your church and say, hey, you know, this matters to us and our family, and we want to make sure we have an opportunity, you know, to minister to other people within our own church. And that's hard to do because we know as a Christian and as a blended family, we're not hand raisers, you know, we're not raising up our hands and saying, hey, right here, you know, we're the divorced folks. Like, you know, we want to, you know, help encourage the church, you know, or other blended families that are here. Like, we don't typically do that. So we want to be encouraged by like, let's help the church by stepping up and saying, hey, we want to have these hard conversations and explain, because I think 9 times out of 10, it's just that the church is uncomfortable with it, or church leadership is uncomfortable with it. They just need to have more conversations about it.
Well, I mean, I really feel like if you build it, they will come, you know, is here, because people aren't going to be walking in your church saying, hey, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm a recovering alcoholic, or hey, I'm an ex-drug addict, unless you have a program like Celebrate Recovery that makes them feel comfortable then coming to it and saying, hey, I am struggling and need help, or I have struggled in the past, I've recovered, and I'd like to be of service in this area. Yeah. And blended families are different. They're not going to, my sister and I, a couple of years ago, were talking about when Josh and I first wanted to start doing this. And my sister was like, she lived in Hawaii at the time. And she's like, we have blended couples in our church and they're fine. And I'm like, of course, it's not like we're walking around like sucking our thumbs and crying, but if you're not going to be talking about it unless there's something that makes you talk about it. Mm-hmm. And if your church started offering, hey, we have this for a blended couple, or hey, we have this workshop for blended families to show you how like God still has forgiven you and things like that. That's when people, if you build it, they will come, will start raising their hands and saying, hey, we're struggling and we want to take advantage of it. Or, hey, we've been married for 27 years and we've seen it, done it, been there. We have a thriving marriage and would like to help be of service in it. That's when people will come. You have to have it in order to get it.
And it's tough because if we even look at like having drums on the stage for a lot of churches for a long time, for many years, I mean, if not centuries, they weren't allowed to have, you know, churches disapproved having, you know, any type of instrument on the stage. Your face is eyes wide, right? Mm-hmm. Right.
It was hard for me. Yeah. Well, I grew up in that church. So I grew up like you could have trumpets or sousaphones, or all of those things in the church. But when we first started coming to this church, I was raised, that guitars and drums, you know, not acoustic guitars, electric guitars, rock band stuff. Okay, that is sinners. Yeah. So when we first started coming to this church, I had a hard time, like, because it was innate in me. Like, that's it. And I am like,
that's my point.
I had to open myself up to it because I'm like, this is really hard for me. He didn't know. He wasn't raised in a church where people taught him that those are devil worshipers up there. Yeah. Okay, you sit down and you protest. So he was loving it, and it took me a little bit to come around for that.
And that's my whole point, right? So the church, you know, it takes a while for them to swing around and say, hey, you know, even our own pastor is like, he's totally like, hey, you know, I'm on staff and I'm divorced. It's not like he doesn't have a problem with that, but it doesn't.
The pastor isn't. Josh is.
Yes, I'm divorced, right? But the pastor doesn't have a problem with it, was my point. You know, but not all churches are okay with that. You know, but when you start looking at them like, well, none of these other churches are doing this, so we're going to wait. You know, we're not going to spearhead something like this. And a lot of times that's what it is. It's no different than like the drums on the stage. Like after a while, it's like, okay, it doesn't biblically say that you're not allowed to have a drum on your stage, right? And after a while, everybody started kind of thinking, oh yeah, right. Like, what are we thinking? Like, why? Like, and so now I understand you can only take that too far. You can start putting fog machines and stuff on your stage. And I mean, you can go off the deep end, right? But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, this is not about supporting divorce. Supporting blended families within the church is not supporting divorce.
No.
We are strong strongly against divorce. Okay. All the problems that we talk about and how to solve are all because of divorce. You know, if you don't get divorced, you stay in a bio family, you don't deal with 90% of the problems that we talk about. So, you know, we want to help encourage and educate the church on saying just because we want to talk about blended family issues doesn't mean that we're in support of divorce. It's important. Okay.
Right.
Number two, they don't see the need. They don't see the needs for it.
No, and that goes back to kind of a little bit of what I was talking about a while ago. It's because there aren't people coming forward saying, hey, I really wish you had a blended family support group here or blended family ministry here.
Mhm.
Because a lot of churches, what we find, they really don't even really have marriage classes or marriage support. What's the word I'm trying to think of? It's for marriage ministry. Yeah.
Marriage ministry.
They don't even have ministry for nuclear marriages. So a lot of people aren't coming forward and doing that, and they feel like no one's saying anything. So it's not like people walking around that have been divorced and they're remarried are like an addict, like where they're walking around, you can see like pick marks on themselves, or they're drunk or losing their jobs or things like that. But it comes down to people when they are on the verge of getting divorced, and then they're going to the pastor and wanting counseling, or a pastor and wanting counseling. That should be red flags though. Like, how many couples do you have coming to you that are on the verge of divorce, and is it their second marriage or their third marriage? Sometimes people aren't forthcoming with that. Or sometimes people are like, hey, you don't even know. It may be their first marriage, both of them, but someone had a kid before they actually got married.
Yeah.
So it's still a blended family. And you have to counsel and talk to us differently and give us different tools for our marriage than a nuclear family, because it is not the same. Josh can't come in, being a hammer fist of a disciplinarian with all of the kids equally, because not all of the kids when they were all younger were his. And if he came down too hard, or if I came down too hard, they're going to go back and they're going to tell the other parent, and it's going to cause a bunch of crap.
Well, it caused crap between us.
And with the exes.
No.
In a lot of pastors that we know, and a lot of the people that we've talked to, their pastors, they are not divorced. We know a couple divorced pastors.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of a couple off the top of my head, but a lot of them are not, and they've been married for decades. And so they don't understand the need. That's why they don't see it, is because they don't actually understand it. And then when a marriage couple comes to them and needs counseling, they just counsel them the same as they counsel everybody else. And it can't be the same. It can't, because it's different.
Yeah, I was at the church today and I was setting up some stuff.
Oh, here we go. Here's the surprise.
I was setting up some stuff for
Is it
our
the
event.
Surprise?
No, yeah, it's not really a surprise, but
Oh, you said a surprise.
well, I mean, it's like this. Whoa,
It's
man!
a surprise
like
to me.
balloons and things are gonna fly out there, right? So it's a surprise to you. But I was having this conversation, right? So the pastor came in, one of the pastors that we have at our church, not our head pastor, but he came in. He was kind of asking some questions and stuff, and we always have these open, candid conversations. Something I love about it. He's actually in his doctorate right now to get his doctorate degree. And so he's very inquisitive. He wants to know. And he wants to know things he doesn't know. And I appreciate that about him. So we started having this conversation, and we started asking about all this different stuff. And I says, well, the one thing that a lot of people don't understand is, like, when you have children in a church, and then like they're doing camp points in like the children's area. So for every week that kids come into children's church, our church awards these kids points for attendance, right? And at the end, or when camp time comes up, they're allowed to redeem all these points so the parents don't have to pay for camp or pay for less of camp. I said to him, well, what happens when kids only come every other week? And he just stood and he stared at me. And he said, I never thought about that. And it's not that he doesn't care. It's not
Right.
that he doesn't think to himself, like, I don't care about it. No. He was just like, I've been going to this church my whole life, and I've never thought about that before. That's a really good point. And that's what I'm saying. Like, they just don't understand the needs. They don't see the need. And it's not like everybody's running up and saying, hey, my kid didn't get double points because he's only here half time. We don't do that. We suffer in silence. We figure we're the ones that's caused the past problems. Like, we're supposed to suck it up, and this is part of the punishment. And that's just untrue. And so we have to help educate the church and speak up and have these conversations, because they don't see the needs. And if we're not bringing up these types of needs that we need, if we're not talking about them, the church is blind to it. They just don't know.
Well, and it's no different than anything else. That's why it takes a village, because people don't know what they don't know.
Mhm.
And there's certain blind spots in my life that I don't even know to think about, or would have any inkling to think about, until someone that's close to me has gone through it or has that going on in their life, and then they bring it up to me to help change my perspective on something. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that. I never had a reason to think about it. Just like this pastor has never had a reason to think about in his own life. No one in his family is blended, especially in our church. There is some blended families, but there is a lot of generational families that are, the great grandparents and the grandparents and the parents and the kids, and they're all still together, and there is no blend anywhere touching them. And that's rare, actually, because a lot of people usually, they may be in a nuclear family, but their parents are divorced, or
brothers
their siblings are divorced, or something like that. So somewhere a blended family touches them, which makes them think about it. Like Jay and Laura LaFoon, who, are close friends of ours, they relate to us and really got excited about us because her sister is a blended family and has been for 27 years, so usually blended families touch somewhere.
Yeah. But not everybody sees the need or the desire to have any of these things. And if we're not speaking up, if we're not saying something, if we're not bringing it, the church just understand. And a lot of times I think what we want to do is we want to point fingers at the church. We want to say, shame on this church for not doing these things. Well, in our church, we have a family that has a child that has special needs. Well, they brought an awareness to the pastor. Like, hey, I know there's other people in this church that have children with special needs, and they can't go down inside the kids area because they can't do that, right? They can't go down there because it's too much for them. And so they're like, they can't participate in church. The parents have to take turns participating in church on Sunday because someone has to stay with the kid. Well, the pastor was like, well, that's ridiculous. Why don't we just create a special needs room at our church? Right? He was all for it. And they went down and they created this whole special needs room and all this stuff and poured resources into it. It's the same scenario. It's the same exact scenario. They don't see the needs, right? So it's up to us to make sure that we bring it up and we say something to the local church. Okay? All right, number 3, third thing. They don't know what to do.
No, and they don't know what to do, and it's unfair of us then, even if they don't know what to do, to put it on them to do it.
That's it.
Like Josh just brought up, this family that came up to the pastor. After they brought it to the pastor's, awareness, the pastor wasn't the one down there creating this room. The pastor gave them the go-ahead, and they did it. And that family is a very large family. There's lots of siblings and cousins and everything. They all pooled. They all, do fundraisers and things like that. And they did it. They put the work in, and they also painted other halls and rooms and stuff in our church as well. And it's no different. Like, you bring it up to the pastor's attention. It's not pointing fingers at them. They don't know what to do. So it's like, you're coming to them as the quote unquote expert in it because you're the one that's in it. Then don't just bring it up to them and say, hey, don't be the idea guy. Where they see Josh's sigh. And I can't stand people like that. Like, you know what? I have this great idea, blah, blah, blah. And then they expect everybody else to do it and then be like the string holder for all the puppets here. And it's like, you don't come up to the pastor and say, we need to have a blended family ministry and then put more on his plate. Like, pastors have a lot on their plate already. Right. They're shepherding the whole congregation, not just blended families, but the elderly and people that don't even come to the church. Like, if my dad passed away, I would expect my pastor to show up at the funeral. My dad never set foot in that church. All of those things. They have a lot on their shoulders. So come to them with solutions. Come to them with, even if it's something as simple as Ron Deal's books to have available at the church or resources. I use him because he has the most abundant plethora of tools and resources because he's been doing it for so long than anyone else right now. And he's a Christian and he is a counselor or a therapist. I don't know what his exact title is, if he's a psychologist or what, but he is not a license, but he has his degree in counseling. So, and he does that for a living. So something like, come with a solution to something.
Yeah. And that's really kind of how our Perfectly Blended event came about, right? We're like, hey, we see a need. We know that we don't know if all these other churches are going to want to be part of this. We don't know. And I had to go and I had to have a talk with our pastor and say, hey, this is our vision. This is something that Christy and I want to do. We're not asking the church to pay for this. We're not asking for the church to do this for us. We're saying, hey, we want to use the church building and we'll get funding and we'll take care of it all outside of this and we'll take care of it because we're not asking them to know what to do.
Right.
We know what to do, or we're at least throw some mud at the wall, right? I mean, I say know what to do, but we know.
Get feedback.
Right. We're like, hey, we'll chuck some mud at the wall. We'll see what happens, right? And amazingly enough, our church comes around us. Our church family is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Most of them aren't even part of blended families that are coming around us to help with the stuff.
Yeah.
But they just want to be part of it. Do they know what to do? No. They're entrusting that we're the ones with the needs, that we're going to know or have an idea of what to do. Not in a perfection way at all, but in some type of progress. So speak up and say, hey, like Christy said, don't be the idea person, be the solution person. Say, hey, I want to do this. I want to start some type of ministry here on Sundays, a small group, and I want to go through Ron Deal's book. Here's the book. You know, I encourage your pastor to read through it, make sure that he finds everything that's in it okay to be taught to the church, and then have conversations about it and say, this is what I'd like to do. I want to be part of this.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of power in that, right?
Yeah. Even if you do a study, I know Josh and I went to a summit, Step Family Summit. Was
2 years ago?
Yeah. I don't know. But someone said that they took one of the books and just asked if they could do, a study on it with other families within the church. And they got permission to do that. And they had when on Wednesday nights, if you have Bible studies at your church or whatever, they had a study with the Bible because it's biblical. Ron Deal's books are biblical. Did a study with that book that could help other blended families be more successful because the divorce rate with blended families when there's kids involved is higher
70%
than divorce rates of first marriages. And people are shocked. Everyone knows divorce rate, 50% chance you're going to get a divorce. But a lot of people don't know that second marriages, it's even higher. It's 25%, almost 25% higher when there's kids involved. So we do need to be supporting and having tools for second marriages especially in the church, because we don't want to just keep saying, oh, you've screwed up once, you might as well do it again. You might as well get another divorce. Like, no, let's make marriages successful, because there can be blended families. Josh and I could be helping save a nuclear marriage. That you could be a blended marriage that learns how to make your marriage so unbelievably strong that a couple that's in their first marriage that's on the edge of divorce, you could give them tools to help them not get divorced. That's the power in this. Like, don't get divorced. Stop divorce. That's what we want to do. Second marriages need to understand, don't get divorced. Like, you can make your marriage so rock solid by putting God in the center of it. And a lot of the churches just don't know what to do. And you have to be willing to come and not be pointing fingers and angry. And you have to have a loving heart like Jesus. I mean, we lose sight of that so much. You need to have Jesus's heart.
Yeah, and we see so much of it in recovery because we do, help run a recovery ministry at our church. And, a big part of that is the majority of people, so Christy and I are recovering alcoholics, but the majority of people that come are not. Now, that's not to say that we are unable to help these people with the story that God has, given us throughout our lives. It's just not true. And so just like Christy's saying, maybe you could work on your marriage or raising children in such a way that you can impact and influence other people to stick with what they have, what God has already ordained for these people, because it's not God that's giving up on marriages. It's us. It's us getting away from God. Stop relying on him and stop following his word and living it out. And then we start, just falling into sin and all these other things that make it all fall apart. So, be encouraged that the perspective of the church is something that it's up to us to change.
Yeah. It's
not up to the church to just change magically or the person to the left of you or the right of you. Our pastor said something over the last couple sermons that he's preached. And he said, don't sit here and listen to this sermon and think to yourself, oh my gosh, I know exactly who this is perfect for. It's not perfect for somebody else. It's perfect for you.
Yeah.
So the perspective of blended families in the church isn't on somebody else's shoulders. It's on yours. So we need to speak up and we need to talk to the church. We need to educate the church. We need to get the resources and go and let them know, like, this is important. There's people within this congregation that need support and they're not raising their hands and letting you know.
Right.
So I want to thank you so much for being here. Like I said, if you haven't had an opportunity to sign up for the event yet, and it is before November 5th, make sure you get a chance to do so. If you use code CHURCH when you go to sign up, you can get free tickets, 2 free tickets. So you can come for free. Yeah. All right. I want to thank you guys for being here. We'll see you live next Tuesday at 7.
Bye.